I never expected a Tuesday morning in January to turn into the most absurd battle of wills I had ever experienced. But that was before Patricia Winters decided that my snow day supplies were somehow community property. My name is Henry Keller, and I had lived in the Riverside Meadows subdivision in Burlington, Vermont, for 3 years without major incident. The neighborhood was one of those newer developments with identical beige houses, manicured lawns, and streetlights that all looked like they came from the same catalog. Most of my neighbors were perfectly reasonable people who waved when they saw you and kept to themselves. Then there was Patricia. Patricia Winters was the HOA president, a title she wore like a crown. She was 52 years old with a bleached blonde bob that never moved in the wind and a wardrobe consisting entirely of pantsuits in various shades of beige and cream. She had moved into the neighborhood 4 years ago and immediately inserted herself into every aspect of community management. Within 6 months, she had somehow maneuvered herself into the HOA presidency, and she had been there ever since. I worked from home as a software developer, which meant I was around the neighborhood more than most people. This gave me a front row seat to Patricia's daily patrols. She walked the streets every morning at 8 sharp, clipboard in hand, looking for violations. A garbage can left out past pickup time, a lawn that was a 1/4 inch too long, a car parked facing the wrong direction. Nothing escaped her notice. The trouble started on a Monday evening. The weather forecast had been warning about a massive snowstorm headed our way, the kind that happens once every few years in Vermont. They were predicting 18 to 24 inches of snow, winds up to 40 miles per hour, and a complete whiteout. The governor had already declared a state of emergency, and everyone was being told to stock up and stay home. I had gone to the grocery store after work hours ended, around 5 in the evening. The place was packed with people grabbing bread, milk, and batteries like the apocalypse was coming. I had a different strategy. I loaded up my cart with hot cocoa mix, marshmallows, whipped cream, peppermint sticks, chocolate chips, cookies, and all the fixings for the coziest snow day imaginable. I also grabbed some practical stuff like batteries, candles, and extra firewood, but my real focus was on comfort. When I got home, I made multiple trips from my car to my front door, carrying bags full of supplies. My house was a corner lot, which meant I had visibility from 2 streets. It also meant Patricia could see me from her house, which was directly across the street from my side yard. I had just finished unloading everything when I heard the clicking of heels on pavement. I turned to see Patricia Speed walking toward me, her clipboard clutched to her chest. "Henry," she called out, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. "Henry, I need to speak with you." I suppressed a sigh and turned to face her with what I hoped was a neutral expression. "Hey, Patricia, what can I do for you?" She stopped a few feet away, her eyes scanning the bags I had left by my front door. "I see you have been shopping for the storm." "Yep, just stocking up like everyone else." Her lips pressed into a thin line. "I am going around to remind everyone about the HOA emergency preparedness guidelines. During severe weather events, the community expects all residents to contribute to the collective welfare." I blinked at her. "I'm sorry, what?" "The HOA Handbook, Section 12, Subsection 4. During community emergencies, residents are expected to pool resources for the benefit of all neighbors." I had read the HOA Handbook when I bought the house. It was 70 pages of mind-numbing regulations about fence heights and approved paint colors. I did not remember anything about pooling resources. "Patricia, I think you are misunderstanding that section. It says we should be willing to help neighbors in need, like checking on elderly residents or sharing a generator if someone's power goes out." It does not mean I have to give you my groceries. Her eyes narrowed. I am organizing a community shelter at my house for anyone who loses power. I am collecting supplies from each household to ensure we have enough for everyone. That is very thoughtful of you, but I have enough supplies for myself, and I am planning to stay in my own house. Henry, this is about community responsibility, and I am being responsible by making sure I do not need to bother anyone during the storm. She took a step closer, her voice dropping to what I assumed she thought was a reasonable tone but came across as condescending. I can see you have purchased an excessive amount of supplies, luxury items from the look of it, hot cocoa, marshmallows. While you are hoarding treats, there are families in this neighborhood who might not have enough food. The word hoarding made my blood pressure spike. I bought food and supplies at a public store with my own money. That is not hoarding. That is shopping. And I saw plenty of everything still on the shelves when I left. Nevertheless, the community expects better from its residents. I will need you to contribute at least half of your supplies to the community shelter fund. I stared at her in disbelief. You want me to give you half of the groceries I just bought for the community, she said, as if that made it reasonable. No, the word hung in the air between us. Patricia's face flushed pink, then red. Excuse me, I said. No. These are my supplies that I bought with my money. You are welcome to organize whatever you want at your house, but I am not giving you my stuff. This is a violation of community standards. I can issue a fine, issue away. I will see you at the next board meeting to contest it. I picked up my bags and turned toward my door. This is not over, Henry, she called after me. I did not respond. I just went inside, locked the door, and started putting away my supplies. That should have been the end of it, but with Patricia, nothing was ever really over. The snow started falling around 11 that night. I woke up Tuesday morning to a world transformed into white. The snow was already at least 10 inches deep and still coming down hard. The wind howled against the windows, and I could barely see across the street through the whiteout conditions. I made myself coffee and settled in at my home office, planning to get some work done while enjoying the storm from the comfort of my warm house. Around 9, my doorbell rang. I was not expecting anyone. Who would be out in this weather? I went to the front door and looked through the peephole. Patricia stood on my porch, covered in snow, looking like a very angry snowman in a beige parka. I opened the door a crack. Patricia, what are you doing out in this? The governor said to stay inside. I need to speak with you about the supplies. We talked about this yesterday. The answer is still no. Henry, this is serious. My power went out an hour ago. I felt a twinge of sympathy. Losing power in a blizzard was no joke. I am sorry to hear that. You need to come in and warm up. I need the supplies you purchased. If you are not going to contribute them to the community shelter, I need them for my own house. The sympathy evaporated. You want me to give you my supplies because your power went out. I do not have heat. I need the items to stay warm and fed. Patricia, I have a generator and a fireplace. You are welcome to come inside and wait out the storm here, but I am not giving you my supplies so you can go back to your cold house. I am not leaving my home. I just need you to be a good neighbor and share. You mean give. You want me to give you things. This is what community means, Henry. I felt my patience snap. You know what? No, you have been harassing me since yesterday about this. I offered to let you come inside where it is warm, which is more than generous. But I am not rewarding your entitled behavior by handing over things I bought for myself. The HOA will hear about this. You are the HOA president, Patricia. You are the one who will hear about it. Have a safe walk back. I closed the door. She rang the doorbell 6 more times. I ignored it. Eventually, she gave up and I watched through the window as she trudged back across the street through the knee-deep snow. I felt a little guilty, but mostly I was annoyed. I had offered her a warm place to stay. She had refused because she wanted my stuff instead. That was not my problem. Around noon, I decided to make myself some hot cocoa. Not out of spite, just because it seemed like the perfect snow day activity. I went into my kitchen, which faced the street and had a large window over the sink. I pulled out my new supplies, the fancy hot cocoa mix, the marshmallows, the whipped cream. I heated up milk on the stove instead of using water, making it extra rich and creamy. While I was stirring the cocoa, I happened to glance out the window. Patricia's house was directly across the street, and I could see her standing in her front window watching me. Even from that distance, I could see the scowl on her face. An idea formed in my head. It was petty. It was childish. It was absolutely something I should not do. I did it anyway. I poured my hot cocoa into my largest mug, topped it with a mountain of whipped cream and marshmallows, and added a peppermint stick for good measure. Then I walked to my front window, the one that faced Patricia's house directly, and stood there in full view. I raised my mug in a little salute toward her window, then took a long, exaggerated sip. I could not see her expression clearly from that distance, but I saw her figure stiffen. She disappeared from the window. I felt a rush of petty satisfaction. It was mean, sure, but she had been harassing me for almost 24 hours about supplies I had legally purchased. A little petness seemed fair. I went back to my office and worked for a few hours. The snow continued to fall. By mid-afternoon, we had at least 18 inches, and it showed no signs of stopping. Around 3, my phone rang. It was my neighbor from 2 houses down, an elderly man named George Hendricks. "Henry, it's George. I hate to bother you, but my power went out and I am getting pretty cold over here. Do you still have power?" "I do, and I have a generator as backup. Do you want to come over? If it is not too much trouble, I can barely feel my fingers. Come on over. Do you need help getting here?" No, I can make it. Thank you, son." George showed up 10 minutes later, bundled in about 15 layers of clothing. I helped him inside and got him settled in my living room near the fireplace. I made him a cup of hot cocoa, and he wrapped his hands around the mug gratefully. "You are a lifesaver, Henry. I did not prepare like I should have." "Happy to help. You can stay as long as you need." We chatted for a while about the storm and the neighborhood. George had lived in Riverside Meadows since it was first built, one of the original residents. "I hear Patricia has been giving you trouble," he said eventually. "Word travels fast. She came by my house this morning, demanding I give her my canned goods for her community shelter. I told her I needed them for myself. She was not pleased. She does not seem to understand the concept of personal property." George chuckled. "Patricia means well, but she has a hard time understanding that being HOA president does not make her the queen of the neighborhood. She thinks every rule is a suggestion for other people and a law when it benefits her. Has she always been like this? More or less. She got worse after her husband left her 2 years ago. I think she channels all her energy into controlling the HOA because it is something she can control." I felt another small pang of sympathy, but it was hard to maintain when I remembered her standing on my porch demanding my groceries. George ended up staying for dinner. I made spaghetti, and we watched the news coverage of the storm. It was being called one of the worst blizzards in Vermont history. The entire state was shut down. Around 7, there was a pounding on my door. Not a knock, a full-on pounding. I opened it to find Patricia again, but this time she was not alone. She had brought 2 other neighbors, Sandra Mitchell and Robert Pemberton. They were both on the HOA board. "Henry," Patricia said, her voice tight, "we need to come in." "Why? HOA business." I looked at Sandra and Robert. They both looked uncomfortable. In the middle of a blizzard. This could not wait. No, Patricia said firmly. It cannot. I sighed and stepped aside. They trooped in, shaking snow everywhere. George looked up from the couch with raised eyebrows. Patricia's eyes locked onto the kitchen, where the evidence of my hot cocoa making was still visible. Her jaw clenched. "Henry," she began, "it has come to the attention of the board that you are in violation of HOA bylaws regarding community cooperation during emergencies. We already discussed this. There is no bylaw that says I have to give you my groceries." Sandra spoke up, her voice apologetic. "Henry, Patricia showed us Section 12, subsection 4. It does say something about resource sharing during emergencies. It says we should be willing to help neighbors in need, which I am. George is here right now because his power went out. That is helping. What Patricia is demanding is that I give her my personal property for no reason." "Your power has not gone out," Patricia said accusingly. "You have supplies and comfort while other members of the community are suffering. My power has not gone out because I prepared properly. And again, I offered to let you stay here. You refused. I should not have to leave my home. Then deal with the consequences of that choice." Robert cleared his throat. "Look, Henry, maybe we can reach a compromise here. What if you contributed just a small portion of your supplies to help out some of the families who did not prepare as well? Who are these families? George needed help and he is getting it. Are there others?" Patricia pulled out her clipboard. "The Martinez family has 3 children and very limited supplies. The Johnsons have a newborn baby. The Chens have elderly parents living with them. And have any of them asked for help? Or are you just assuming they need it? I am being proactive. You are being controlling." I turned to Sandra and Robert. "Have either of you actually checked on these families? Do they need help?" Sandra and Robert exchanged glances. "We have not personally checked," Sandra admitted. "Patricia came to us with this information." "So you are standing in my house during a blizzard, demanding I give up my property, based on Patricia's assumptions. The HOA has the authority to enforce community standards," Patricia insisted. "Show me the specific bylaw that gives you the authority to confiscate personal property." "It is not confiscation. It is community cooperation. If it is voluntary, then I am saying no. If it is mandatory, show me the law." Patricia's face was getting redder by the second. "You are being incredibly selfish. I am being realistic. I bought supplies for myself. I am willing to help neighbors who need it, which I am doing right now with George. But I am not going to give you a bunch of my stuff just because you think you are entitled to it." George spoke up from the couch. "Patricia, the boy has a point. He is helping me right now. That is what neighbors do. You cannot force people to give you their belongings." Patricia turned on him. "You are staying here. My power is out, and Henry was kind enough to offer me his warm house. Unlike some people, he understands what community actually means." I could see Patricia's mind working. She was losing this argument and she knew it, but she was not ready to give up. "Fine," she said. "If you will not contribute to the community voluntarily, the board will vote on whether to fine you for violation of community standards. Go ahead. I will contest it and win. We will see about that." She turned on her heel and marched toward the door. Sandra and Robert followed, both looking embarrassed. After they left, George let out a low whistle. "She is really fixated on this. I do not understand why. It is hot cocoa and marshmallows. It is not like I am hoarding medicine or something." "It is not about the supplies," George said wisely. "It is about control. You said no to her and she cannot handle it." He was probably right, but that did not make the situation any less annoying. The next morning, Wednesday, the snow had finally stopped. We had gotten a total of 23 inches and the entire neighborhood was buried. The streets had not been plowed yet, and everyone was snowed in. George's power came back on around 10, so he headed home with my thanks and a care package of hot cocoa supplies. I insisted he take them, and he accepted with genuine gratitude. That was what neighborly sharing looked like. I decided to shovel my driveway and sidewalk. It was going to take hours, but I needed the exercise, and I wanted to be able to get out once the streets were cleared. I was about an hour into shoveling when Patricia emerged from her house. Her power must have come back on too because she looked less frigid and more determined. She marched through the snow straight toward me. "We need to talk," she announced. I leaned on my shovel. "I am kind of busy here, Patricia. I spoke with the HOA board last night. We are issuing you a fine of $500 for failure to comply with community emergency standards." "That is your choice. I will contest it." "You cannot contest it. The board voted." "The board votes, and then homeowners have the right to contest fines at the next general meeting. It is in your own bylaws, Patricia. Maybe you should read them." Her face flushed. "This is not over." "You keep saying that." She stood there for a moment, clearly trying to think of something else to say. Finally, she just turned and walked back to her house. I went back to shoveling, shaking my head. This was ridiculous. Over the next few days, the neighborhood slowly dug itself out. The streets were plowed, power was restored to everyone, and life started returning to normal. I thought maybe Patricia would drop the whole thing. I was wrong. The following Monday, I received an official letter from the HOA. It informed me that I was being fined $500 for failure to comply with community emergency cooperation standards, and that I had 30 days to pay. It also informed me that I was being placed on HOA probation, which meant any further violations would result in doubled fines. I called Sandra Mitchell, who seemed like the most reasonable member of the board. "Sandra, can you explain to me what HOA probation is? I have never heard of that," she sighed. "Henry, I am sorry. Patricia pushed this through. Robert and I voted against it, but she has been recruiting other board members to her side. There are only 3 board members, you, her, and Robert. She called an emergency board expansion. We now have 5 members. The 2 new ones are friends of hers. She can do that. Technically, yes. The bylaws allow for board expansion with a majority vote of current members. She voted yes, Robert and I voted no, but then she claimed that as president, her vote counted double in tie-breaking situations. That is not how voting works. I know. Robert and I are planning to challenge it at the next general meeting, but until then, her new board members are voting with her on everything. This was getting out of hand. So what do I do about this fine? You can still contest it at the general meeting. That is in 6 weeks. Until then, you do not have to pay. I thanked her and hung up. 6 weeks of this nonsense. But Patricia was not done. Over the next week, I received 3 more violation notices. One for having my garbage visible from the street for more than 12 hours after pickup. One for having a small patch of ice on my sidewalk that I had not salted yet. One for parking my car facing the wrong direction in my own driveway. That last one was so absurd I actually laughed. There was no bylaw about which direction your car faced in your own driveway. I started documenting everything. I took photos, saved all the notices, and started building a case for the general meeting. Then things escalated. 2 weeks after the snowstorm, I came home from a grocery run to find Patricia in my driveway, taking photos of my house. "What are you doing?" I asked, getting out of my car, documenting violations. "What violations?" "Your gutter is detached on the northwest corner. Your mailbox post has a small crack. Your house numbers are fading." I looked at my house. She was technically right about all of those things, but they were incredibly minor issues that probably half the houses in the neighborhood had. Are you inspecting every house this closely, or just mine? I inspect all houses regularly. Show me the photos you have taken of other houses. She clutched her phone to her chest. That is HOA business. So you are just harassing me. Got it. This is not harassment. This is community standards enforcement. I pulled out my own phone and started recording. Patricia, you are on my private property without permission, taking photos of my house and admitting that you are targeting me specifically. I am asking you to leave. Her eyes widened. You cannot record me. Vermont is a one-party consent state. I absolutely can record this conversation. Now please leave my property. She stared at me for a long moment, then turned and walked away, but not before saying, "You are making a big mistake." That evening, I received a notice that I was being fined an additional $1,000 for multiple property maintenance violations and hostile behavior toward HOA representatives. I called Sandra again. She is claiming I was hostile to her. I have video evidence that I simply asked her to leave my property. Send it to me. Robert and I are documenting everything too. We are building a case to remove her from the board. Can you do that? If we can prove she is abusing her position, yes. But we need a majority vote from the general membership, which means we need to wait for the general meeting. 6 weeks felt like an eternity. In the meantime, I decided to fight back in my own petty way. Every afternoon at 3 o'clock, I made myself an elaborate hot cocoa. I went all out. Fancy toppings, whipped cream sculptures, chocolate shavings, the works. And I stood in my front window facing Patricia's house and enjoyed every sip. I knew she could see me. I knew it drove her crazy. And honestly, that made the hot cocoa taste even better. Word started spreading through the neighborhood about what was happening. People were taking sides. Some thought I was being unreasonably stubborn. Others thought Patricia was abusing her power. Most people just wanted the drama to stop. George became my unofficial campaign manager, talking to other neighbors and building support for challenging Patricia at the general meeting. He discovered that I was not the only person she had been targeting. Several other residents had received bogus fines in the past year, but most had just paid them rather than fight. She has been getting away with this because people do not want the hassle, George explained one evening over dinner at my place. But if we can get enough people to stand together, we can vote her out. Do you think we have the numbers? I have been talking to people. We might, but it will be close. The week before the general meeting, things came to a head. I woke up on a Saturday morning to find my mailbox had been knocked over. It was not just knocked over, it had been completely destroyed. Someone had taken a bat or something similar to it and smashed it to pieces. I called the police and filed a report. The officer who came out looked at the damage and agreed it was vandalism. "Any idea who might have done this?" he asked. "I have a suspicion, but no proof." "Does your house have security cameras?" "No, but I am going to install some now." I spent the rest of the weekend installing a security camera system. I put cameras on every corner of my house, covering all angles. Monday morning, I received a notice from the HOA. I was being fined $200 for not having a mailbox, which was a violation of community standards. My mailbox had been destroyed less than 72 hours ago, and she was already fining me for not replacing it. I called Sandra. "This is insane." "I know, just document it. We are almost to the general meeting." I replaced my mailbox that afternoon. It cost me $150, which I added to my growing list of damages. Tuesday evening, my new security cameras caught Patricia walking through my yard at 11 at night. She did not do anything, just walked around my property, but the fact that she was there at all was unsettling. Wednesday morning, I found a notice on my door. I was being fined for having security cameras visible from the street without prior HOA approval. That was it. I was done playing nice. I printed out every single piece of documentation I had. Every bogus fine, every violation notice, every piece of correspondence. I included the security footage of Patricia on my property. I included the police report about my mailbox. I included photos of the minor issues she had cited on my house, alongside photos of identical or worse issues on other houses in the neighborhood, including hers. I made copies for every household in the neighborhood and spent Thursday evening delivering them personally to every single door. Friday morning, my phone started ringing off the hook. Neighbors who had not been paying attention were suddenly furious. People who had paid bogus fines were demanding refunds. The neighborhood Facebook group exploded with posts. Patricia tried to do damage control, posting long explanations about community standards and her duty as president, but the tide had turned. People were angry. The general meeting was Saturday afternoon. It was held in the community clubhouse, a small building near the neighborhood entrance. Usually, these meetings had maybe 15 or 20 people show up. Over 100 people showed up to this one. The room was packed. People were standing along the walls. The energy was electric. Patricia called the meeting to order, but she could barely be heard over the noise of people talking. "Order," she shouted, banging her gavel. "I call this meeting to order." The room gradually quieted down. "We have a lot to cover today," Patricia began. "First, I want to address some false rumors that have been circulating about HOA enforcement actions." "They are not rumors," someone shouted from the back. "We have the documentation." The room erupted again. Patricia's face went red. "Everyone will have a chance to speak during the public comment period," she said tightly. Sandra stood up. "Actually, Patricia, I am invoking bylaw section 8, subsection 2. Any board member can call for an emergency vote on leadership if they have support from 10% of the general membership." She held up a petition. "I have signatures from 43 households, which is well over 10%. I am calling for an immediate vote on your removal as HOA president." The room went silent. Patricia stared at Sandra like she had been slapped. "You cannot do that," Patricia said. "I can, and I am." Sandra turned to face the room. "Patricia Winters has abused her position as HOA president. She has issued fraudulent fines, targeted specific residents for harassment, and expanded the board illegally to maintain her power. I have documentation to support all of these claims, and I move that we vote immediately on her removal." "Second," called Robert from the other side of the room. "This is a coup," Patricia said, her voice shaking with rage. "This is a targeted attack because I dare to enforce community standards." "You targeted me because I would not give you my hot cocoa," I said, standing up. "And you have been abusing your power for years. It stops today." The room erupted in applause. Patricia tried to maintain control of the meeting, but it was hopeless. Sandra presented the documentation, which included everything I had compiled plus evidence from other residents. The pattern was clear. Patricia had been using the HOA as her personal fiefdom, targeting anyone who crossed her and making up rules to suit her purposes. When it came time to vote, the result was overwhelming. 92 households voted for her removal. 8 voted against, including Patricia herself. Patricia sat in her chair, her face pale. For a moment, I almost felt sorry for her. Then I remembered her standing on my porch demanding my groceries, and the sympathy faded. "This vote is invalid," she said quietly. "I am still president." "No, Patricia," Sandra said gently. "You are not. Please hand over the HOA documents and accounts." "No." The room went quiet again. Patricia, you have to hand over the HOA property, Robert said. It is not yours. I am the president. These are my responsibility. You were the president, now you are not. Patricia stood up, clutching her clipboard like a life preserver. I am not giving you anything. This neighborhood would fall apart without me. You all need me. We really do not, someone called out, and the room laughed. Patricia's face crumpled. She looked around the room at all the faces staring at her, and something seemed to break. She dropped her clipboard and ran out of the room. There was a moment of stunned silence, then Sandra said, "Okay, well, that was dramatic. We will need to formally request the documents from her. If she refuses, we will need to get the police involved." The meeting continued. Sandra was elected as the new president. Robert remained as vice president, and 3 new board members were elected from the general membership. The board's first act was to void all the fines Patricia had issued in the past 6 months, and to begin reviewing all fines from the past 2 years for legitimacy. My fines were all thrown out naturally. As people were leaving, several neighbors came up to thank me for standing up to Patricia. George clapped me on the shoulder. "You did good, kid. This neighborhood is better off now." I felt pretty good about it too, but the story was not over yet. Sunday morning, I was enjoying a well-earned cup of hot cocoa when police cars pulled up to Patricia's house. I watched through my window as 2 officers went to her door. An hour later, George called me. "Have you heard?" "Heard what?" "Patricia has been arrested." "What? Why?" Apparently, when Sandra went to get the HOA financial records, she found some major discrepancies. Patricia has been embezzling HOA funds for at least 2 years. Over $30,000 is missing. I sat down heavily. "You are kidding." "Nope." The new board called the police, and they arrested her this morning. It is going to be a whole thing now. There will be an investigation and probably a trial. I did not know what to say. I had thought Patricia was just a power-hungry busybody. I had not expected actual crime. Over the next few weeks, the details came out. Patricia had been using HOA funds for personal expenses, everything from her car payments to her groceries to a vacation to Florida. She had covered it up by manipulating the financial reports and refusing to let anyone else see the books. The $30,000 she had stolen was nearly all of the HOA's reserve fund, money that was supposed to be for emergency repairs and community improvements. Patricia was charged with embezzlement and fraud. She tried to fight the charges at first, claiming she had used the money for HOA purposes, but the paper trail was damning. She had literally used the HOA credit card at the grocery store the same day she had demanded my hot cocoa supplies. In the end, she took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to embezzlement and was sentenced to 2 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 1 year. She was also ordered to pay back the $30,000 plus damages. The house across from mine went up for sale a month later. Patricia's soon-to-be ex-husband wanted nothing to do with the property or the neighborhood anymore. The new HOA board under Sandra's leadership was like night and day. They focused on actual community improvement, not petty rule enforcement. They organized neighborhood events, fixed common areas that had been neglected, and created a real emergency assistance program for residents who needed help. They even created a community supply pantry in the clubhouse, where people could donate extra food and supplies, and anyone who needed help could take what they needed, no questions asked. It was what Patricia had claimed to want, but done in a way that was actually helpful instead of controlling. As for me, I became something of a neighborhood legend. I was the guy who stood up to the HOA and won. People still joke about it. George had a T-shirt made for me that said, "I survived Patricia Winters and all I got was this lousy T-shirt and excellent hot cocoa." I wore it to the neighborhood 4th of July barbecue, and people loved it. The funniest part was that after everything settled down, several neighbors asked me for my hot cocoa recipe. I ended up teaching a hot cocoa workshop at the clubhouse one evening in December. 20 people showed up, and we made elaborate hot cocoa creations together. It became an annual tradition. I still make myself hot cocoa on cold afternoons. But now I do it in my kitchen, not in the front window. There is no one to spite drink it anymore, and honestly, the cocoa tastes better when it is just about enjoying it. The new family that moved into Patricia's old house are lovely people. They have twin daughters who are in elementary school, and their mom Sarah and I became friends. I told her the whole story one evening over coffee, and she laughed so hard she nearly choked. So that is why everyone was so weird when we mentioned which house we were buying, she said. They kept asking if we knew the history of the property. Sorry about that. The house has been caught up in weird neighborhood drama. Are you kidding? This is the most interesting neighborhood story I have ever heard. Usually, HOA drama is so boring, but hot cocoa revenge, that is inspired. I learned a lot from the whole experience. I learned that standing up to bullies is important, even when it is uncomfortable. I learned that communities work best when people cooperate voluntarily, not when they are forced to comply. I learned that sometimes the pettiest acts of resistance are the most satisfying. But mostly I learned that hot cocoa is always better when it is made with real milk, topped with real whipped cream, and enjoyed without a side of guilt or obligation. The neighborhood is peaceful now. We have normal HOA meetings where we discuss normal things like whether to repaint the community sign and what color to make it. There are no more surprise fines, no more harassment, no more power trips. Sometimes I think about Patricia and wonder how she is doing. I heard she got released on parole after serving 14 months. She moved to a different state, somewhere in Florida, I think. I hope she found some peace and learned from what happened. But mostly, I do not think about her at all. I think about the friends I made through the experience. I think about how the neighborhood came together when it mattered. I think about the positive changes that came from one person deciding to say no to unreasonable demands. And on cold winter evenings, when the snow is falling and everything is quiet, I make myself a cup of hot cocoa, sit by my fireplace, and enjoy the peace. No one demands my supplies. No one harasses me about community cooperation. No one threatens me with bogus fines. I just enjoy my cocoa, warm and safe in my home, surrounded by a community that finally understands what being good neighbors really means. It is not about enforcing rules or controlling others. It is not about forcing people to share or demanding compliance. It is about being there for each other when it really matters, respecting boundaries, and working together voluntarily. It is about making hot cocoa for a cold neighbor without being asked. It is about checking on elderly residents during storms. It is about creating systems that help people instead of controlling them. That Tuesday morning in January, when Patricia first demanded my supplies, feels like a lifetime ago now. It has been almost a year since the whole thing happened. The anniversary of the big snowstorm is coming up next week, and the neighborhood is planning a party to celebrate. They are calling it the Snowstorm Survival Party, and the theme is hot cocoa. George thought that was hilarious and absolutely appropriate. I volunteered to be in charge of the hot cocoa bar. I am going to set up a whole station with different flavors, toppings, and mix-ins. People can create their own perfect cup. It is going to be epic. Sarah, my neighbor from Patricia's old house, offered to help. She is bringing homemade marshmallows and cookies. Other neighbors are bringing snacks and appetizers. Someone is organizing snow games for the kids. It is going to be exactly what a neighborhood event should be. People coming together because they want to, sharing because they choose to, and enjoying each other's company without any hidden agendas or power plays. The other day, a new family moved in 3 houses down. They came by to introduce themselves, and we got to talking about the neighborhood. They asked about the HOA. It is pretty reasonable, I told them. The president is great. They focus on actual issues, not nitpicking. Just be a decent neighbor and you will be fine. That is good to hear, the husband said. Our last neighborhood had an HOA president who was a nightmare. She tried to fine us for having the wrong color Christmas lights. His wife laughed. Tell them about the garden gnome incident. As they told their story, I smiled and nodded. But inside I was thinking about how universal this experience seemed to be. Every neighborhood had stories about HOA overreach, about petty tyrants with clipboards, about bizarre rules and ridiculous fines. But not every neighborhood successfully stood up to it. Not every community came together to make changes. We had been lucky in that way. After the new neighbors left, I sat on my porch for a while, watching the neighborhood. Kids were playing in the street. People were walking dogs. Someone was mowing their lawn. It was all beautifully, wonderfully normal. George walked by and waved. Ready for the party next week? Absolutely. I have been perfecting my peppermint hot cocoa recipe. Outstanding. We should make this an annual tradition even after people forget about the whole Patricia thing. I think they already are forgetting, which is probably healthy. George sat down on my porch steps. You know what the funniest part of this whole thing is? Patricia was so obsessed with those supplies, with your hot cocoa and marshmallows. She turned it into this huge battle of wills. And now hot cocoa has become the symbol of the neighborhood coming together. It is like cosmic irony. He was right. What Patricia had tried to take by force had become something the whole community shared willingly. The thing she had been so fixated on controlling had become a symbol of cooperation and community spirit. You think she knows? I asked. About the hot cocoa tradition and the party. I doubt it. And even if she did, I do not think she would understand. She never got it. Community is not something you can force or control. It is something you build together. We sat in comfortable silence for a few minutes, watching the neighborhood go about its business. Thank you, I said eventually. For what? For having my back during all of that. For organizing people and gathering support. I could not have fought that battle alone. George smiled. That is what neighbors do, kid. We look out for each other. Besides, someone needed to stand up to her eventually. I am glad it was you. You have got guts. After George left, I went inside and made myself a cup of hot cocoa. Not because I was proving a point or being petty, just because I wanted one. I took it out to my back deck and sat down, enjoying the late afternoon sunshine. It was November now, and the air had that crisp quality that promised winter was coming soon. Another snowstorm would hit eventually, and when it did, I would be prepared. I would stock up on supplies, batten down the hatches, and ride it out in comfort. But this time, if a neighbor needed help, they would actually ask. And I would actually help. Not because some rule forced me to, but because that is what good neighbors do. And if someone wanted hot cocoa, I would share my recipe freely. I might even make them a cup myself, because that is what community is supposed to be about, not demands and fines and power trips, but connection and generosity and mutual support, and really good hot cocoa. The snowstorm party the following week was a massive success. Over 75 people showed up, including families with kids, elderly residents, and even some people from the neighboring subdivision who had heard about our neighborhood drama and wanted to see what all the fuss was about. The hot cocoa bar was a hit. I had set up 6 different flavors: classic, peppermint, salted caramel, Mexican spiced, white chocolate raspberry, and dark chocolate orange. The toppings table looked like a dessert shop had exploded with whipped cream, marshmallows in 3 different sizes, chocolate shavings, crushed candy canes, caramel sauce, and more. Kids and adults alike loved creating their own custom cocoa concoctions. I saw one little girl make a cup with all 6 flavors mixed together, which was either going to be genius or a disaster. She declared it delicious, though her taste buds might have been overwhelmed into submission. Sarah's homemade marshmallows were incredible. She had made them in 4 different flavors: vanilla bean, chocolate, strawberry, and toasted coconut. People were fighting over them in the friendliest possible way. The outdoor games were a hit too. Some of the dads organized a snowball fight tournament that got surprisingly competitive. The kids built snowmen, and there was a prize for the most creative one. The winner was a snow dinosaur that was actually pretty impressive. As the afternoon wore on and the sun started to set, someone brought out a fire pit and we gathered around it, sipping cocoa and telling stories. Several people shared their own HOA horror stories from previous neighborhoods. It became a sort of informal support group. "You know what we should do?" suggested Marcus, one of the newer board members. "We should create an HOA Hall of Fame for the most ridiculous rules and fines. Like a warning to ourselves to never become that bad." Everyone loved the idea. We ended up creating a whole display in the clubhouse with the most egregious examples of HOA overreach we could find, both from our own neighborhood's past and from stories people had heard. It became a popular conversation piece, and a reminder of what we were trying not to be. The party wound down around 8, with people slowly drifting home, full of cocoa and cookies and good feelings. Several people came up to thank me personally for organizing the cocoa bar. "This was exactly what this neighborhood needed," one woman told me. "Just people being people, having fun together. No stress, no rules, just community." That was the best compliment I could have received. As I was packing up the cocoa supplies, Sandra came over to help. "This was perfect," she said. "I think this might be the best neighborhood event we have ever had." "It was pretty great," I agreed. "You know, I have been thinking about the whole situation with Patricia. I know it was awful at the time, but in a weird way, I am glad it happened." I looked at her in surprise. "Really?" "Yeah, because it forced us to examine what we wanted this neighborhood to be. It made us come together and fight for something better. And now we have this." She gestured at the dispersing crowd, the happy faces, the sense of community. "We would not have this if we had not gone through that." She was right. Sometimes the worst situations lead to the best outcomes. Sometimes you have to go through the conflict to get to the resolution. "Plus," Sandra added with a grin, "you standing in your window drinking hot cocoa while she glared at you from across the street is the funniest thing I have ever heard. I wish I had seen it." I laughed. It was pretty satisfying at the time. Petty but satisfying. The best kind of petty. We finished packing up, and I hauled everything back to my house. As I was putting things away in my kitchen, I looked out the window at Patricia's old house, where Sarah's family now lived. The lights were on, and I could see them moving around inside, probably getting the twins ready for bed. It was strange to think that just a year ago, Patricia had lived there, watching me from that same window, plotting her next move in our absurd conflict. Now there was a nice family there, people who contributed positively to the neighborhood, who understood that being part of a community was about give and take, not just take. I made myself one final cup of cocoa for the evening, this time a simple classic version with just marshmallows. I took it to my living room and settled into my favorite chair by the fireplace. My phone buzzed. It was a text from George. "Great party today. You did good, kid. See you around." I smiled and texted back a thanks. As I sat there, warm and comfortable, sipping my cocoa and listening to the fire crackle, I thought about how much my life had changed in the past year. I had gone from being a quiet software developer who kept to himself to being a neighborhood legend and community organizer. I had stood up to a bully and won. I had helped change the neighborhood for the better. I had made real friends and built genuine connections, and all because I refused to hand over my hot cocoa supplies. It sounded absurd when you put it that way. But the cocoa had never really been the point. The point was about boundaries and respect, and standing up for yourself when someone tries to push you around. Patricia had tried to use her position to control people, to force compliance, to take what was not hers. And when someone finally said no, her whole house of cards had collapsed. The embezzlement had been the final nail in the coffin, but the real issue had been deeper than that. It had been about a fundamental misunderstanding of what leadership meant, what community meant, what power was for. Real leadership is not about controlling people. It is about serving them. It is about creating systems and structures that help people thrive, not systems that restrict and punish. Real community is not about forced cooperation. It is about people choosing to work together because they want to, because they see the benefit, because they care about each other. Real power is not about how many rules you can enforce. It is about what you can build, what you can create, what you can inspire. Patricia had understood none of that. She had thought that being HOA president gave her authority over people's lives, that she could demand and dictate and control. She had been wrong, and now the neighborhood was thriving without her, building something better, something real. I finished my cocoa and rinsed the mug, placing it in the dishwasher. Tomorrow was a workday, and I needed to get some sleep. But as I headed upstairs, I felt a profound sense of contentment. Not because I had won some petty battle, but because I was part of something good, something healthy, something that mattered. A community where people looked out for each other, where help was given freely, not demanded. Where hot cocoa was shared with joy, not hoarded with suspicion. Where people could stand in their own windows, drinking whatever they wanted, without fear of harassment or retribution. That was what we had built from the ashes of Patricia's regime, and it was beautiful. The next morning I woke to find a light dusting of snow on the ground. Not a blizzard, just a gentle few inches that made everything look clean and fresh. I made my coffee and checked my email. There was a message from Sandra with the subject line, HOA update. I opened it curiously. It was a newsletter, the new monthly update the board had started sending out to keep everyone informed. The first item was about the upcoming budget meeting. The second was about plans for spring landscaping in the common areas. The third made me smile. Community Cocoa Night. By popular demand, we will be hosting monthly cocoa nights at the clubhouse through the winter. Bring your favorite mug and enjoy community fellowship. Henry Keller has graciously volunteered to run the cocoa bar. All are welcome. I had not technically volunteered yet, but I did not mind. It sounded fun. The rest of the newsletter was equally positive and practical. Information about snow removal schedules, reminders about winter maintenance, announcements about new families moving in. It was everything an HOA communication should be. Helpful, informative, and drama-free. I sent Sandra a reply saying I would be happy to run the monthly cocoa nights, and asking if I could recruit some other neighbors to help so it was not all on me. She wrote back within minutes. Absolutely. This should be a community effort, not a one-person show. I will send out a volunteer sign-up. That was leadership. empowering people, distributing responsibility, making sure no one person had too much power or too much burden. The complete opposite of Patricia's approach. I got ready for work and settled into my home office. It was a normal Tuesday, with meetings and code reviews and the usual software development tasks. But at 3 o'clock, I took a break. I went to my kitchen and made myself a cup of hot cocoa, the way I always did on cold afternoons. As I stood at my kitchen window, mug in hand, I looked across at Sarah's house. She was in her yard with her daughters, all three of them building a snowman together. She saw me at the window and waved. I waved back, no glaring, no animosity, no demands or threats, just neighbors being neighbors. I raised my mug in a silent toast to the neighborhood, to the community we had built, to the battle we had won and the peace we had earned. And then I took a sip of my hot cocoa. It was perfect.